I can still vividly remember that day, back in 2009. I was a junior in high school. It was just a regular school day, and we were sitting in English class working on our final project. Everyone in class needed to use the school laptops for research. Our school's main library had been closed for the entire week due to some unknown damage or renovations. However, even though it was closed, I knew for a fact that the heavy laptop carts were kept in the back storage room of the library. When the teacher asked if anyone could go downstairs to fetch the cart, I shot my hand up instantly. Honestly, I really had to pee, and using the laptop cart as an excuse to get out of class was the perfect cover to hit the restroom. After taking care of business in the bathroom, I walked briskly toward the main double doors of the library. All the lights inside were completely turned off. There wasn't a single staff member or student anywhere in the entire library lobby. The interior was shrouded in darkness, but a tiny bit of afternoon sunlight managed to cut through the large glass windows, allowing me to barely see well enough to navigate the aisles. I made my way to the very back of the library, where the laptop carts were usually locked up. There was a large glass partition window that looked directly into that back storage room from the main area. I grabbed the door handle and yanked on it, but it was firmly locked. I stood there, completely unsure of what to do next, because I definitely didn't want to go back to class empty-handed and face the teacher's frustration. I scanned the empty library, hoping to spot at least one staff member who could give me the keys. Right then, an eerie sound caught my attention from a far corner of the library. The noise was faint, but completely consistent. It sounded exactly like someone rapidly and continuously clicking a mouse or a small switch. Click, click, click. The sound was originating from a small study room in the corner, a room usually reserved for special group sessions. The door to that room was cracked open just a sliver, but the inside was pitch black. Instead of walking straight in, I tried to peer through the main glass window of the study room. When a familiar school library goes completely dark and abandoned, the corners you know by heart lose their familiar warmth. To experience this gripping dread in every single episode, subscribe to Grim Gaze right now. Aided by the dim light bleeding in from the outside hall, I became about 80% sure that someone was crouching down, tucked into the far back corner of that dark room. I pushed the door open a little further, stuck my head into the darkness, and called out, "Is anybody in there?" My own voice echoed hollowly through the vacant library, but no answer came from the darkness. I flicked the light switch on the wall a few times, but the room stayed black. I realized the main power grid to the library had been completely shut off. Driven by a mix of curiosity and sheer confusion, I took 2 cautious steps deeper into the room. I wanted to verify if what I was staring at in the darkness was actually a person. But the moment I got close enough to see it clearly, the ground completely dropped out beneath me. It wasn't human. It was a humanoid. It possessed a head, a torso, and limbs like a human, but its proportions were entirely impossible. It, or whatever that entity was, stood deathly still, staring directly at me. Even in the thick darkness, I could make out the shape of a face on its head, which was at least twice the size of a normal human skull. The thing stood roughly 7 to 8 feet tall, its head practically brushing against the ceiling tiles. I was paralyzed with fear. Right at that moment, I noticed a subtle twitching movement in the darkness right beside the massive entity. It felt like it was preparing to take a step forward directly towards me. My heart stopped for a fraction of a second. I didn't wait around for another moment. I spun around on my heel, bolted through the library's main doors, and sprinted straight out into the bright, crowded corridor. I was leaning against the lockers, gasping for air and violently shaking, when our regular teacher, Ms. Karp, happened to walk by. I practically lunged at her, grabbed her arm, and desperately begged her to come back into the library with me. She looked at me sternly and asked, "The library is sealed off for the week. What were you even in there?" When I stammered something about the laptops, she gave me a cold look and said, "All the laptop carts were moved to the presentation room this morning. Didn't your teacher tell you that?" I had completely tuned out that part of the instructions back in class. I pleaded with Miss Karp until she finally agreed to walk back into the library with me. But when we reached that exact study room, the lights inside were working perfectly and the far corner was completely empty. Miss Karp was furious at me, assuming I was playing a stupid skip class prank or that it was all in my head. Ultimately, I had to go to the presentation room, grab the computer cart, and head back to class, telling the teacher I had accidentally wandered into the library. Terrified to sounding completely insane or stupid, I never breathed a word of this to anyone else at school. But I know for an absolute fact that eyes can play tricks, but that massive figure standing in the corner of that dark room was no illusion. Something shaped like a human, but entirely unhuman, was lying in wait inside that dark library. That incident from 2009 remains a deep, open wound in my mind. On that completely ordinary high school day, while we were getting ready to work on laptops in English class, I had no clue that a simple bathroom break would turn into the single greatest psychological trauma of my entire life. When I volunteered to go fetch the laptop cart from the closed library's back room, my only real objective was to get a quick hall pass and escape class for a few minutes. But the very second I stepped inside that dark library, the air around me grew incredibly heavy. The massive rows of bookshelves rose out of the gloom like towering, menacing black mountains. When I couldn't find a key to the back room, I began wandering the aisles looking for any leftover staff members, and that was exactly when that mysterious clicking sound caught my attention. It was coming straight from the small study room down the hall, its door left open just an inch. When I first peeked through the glass pane of that dark room's window, my breath caught. It looked like someone was standing perfectly upright in the dark corner, staring straight back at me. Their posture was profoundly unnatural. No living human being could hold their spine that rigid and stiff. I gathered my courage, pushed past the door, and flipped the light switch. But with the power cut, the room stayed entirely dark. Back then, I didn't have a smartphone with a built-in flashlight to illuminate the room. I took a few more slow steps forward. As the shape in that dark corner became clearer, the panic inside my chest amplified. Its head was utterly massive compared to the rest of its body, and its arms were freakishly long, hanging down so low they looked like they were almost brushing against the carpet floor. When you suddenly realize that the entity standing in the dark with you isn't human, yet it can hear the exact rhythm of your breathing, running is your only option. For more flawless psychological mysteries, subscribe to Grim Gaze right now. I froze dead in my tracks. I realized that this towering humanoid thing had no visible eyes or nose on its face. There was only the distinct gaping outline of a massive, wide-open mouth. It wasn't shifting an inch, standing as completely motionless as a stone statue. But then, out of nowhere, the shadows surrounding the corner seemed to violently deepen, and I felt that 7 to 8 foot creature slowly, deliberately begin to extend its long, emaciated hand outward, reaching directly for me. In that exact instant, all logical thought evaporated from my brain. Driven by pure, unadulterated terror, I turned and bolted out of the room without even letting out a scream, collapsing into the bright library corridor while gasping for air. When I returned to that room just a few minutes later with Miss Karp, there was absolutely nothing there. The lights turned on perfectly. She looked at me with total disbelief and walked away completely annoyed. I walked back into my classroom and tried my best to act normal, but my mind kept screaming that what I witnessed was not an optical illusion. When the teacher gave me a mild scolding for going to the wrong room for the laptops, I just kept my mouth shut and took it. I didn't tell a single soul, because if a high school kid tells people he saw an 8-foot, faceless monster hiding in the dark library, everyone's just going to label him a lunatic. Even to this day, whenever I walk past an old or dimly lit library, the sound of a phantom mouse clicking echoes clearly in my ears. I still don't know what kind of unholy, inhuman entity took shelter in that dark study room while the school library's power was down, or why it decided to reach out its hand towards me. What are your thoughts on this dark high school library encounter from 2009? Do you think that 8-foot-tall figure was an actual supernatural entity, or was it a deep trick of the mind brought on by the eerie isolation? Let us know your theories in the comments below. If these stories struck a chord with you, leave a like on the video and share it with a friend. And for your regular dose of deep psychological mysteries, make sure to subscribe to Grim Gaze right now. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe and keep your eyes open. Thank you.